Hi, welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Talk Special Economic Zones. I'm your host, Ainsley Brown. I am the Senior Director for Regulations, Policy Monitoring, and Enforcement at Jamaica's Special Economic Zone Authority. In today's episode, we're going to cover the economic global economic governance and special economic zones. Now, what exactly is global economic governance? It's basically the system that governs the global economy, whether it's investment and trade. So it's systems, institutions such as the World Bank, IMF, World Trade World Customs Organization, systems or tools such as the SWIFT system, which facilitates money moving around, the agreement under the OECD, Beps, base erosion and profit shifting, the Financial Action Task Force, which deals with anti money laundering and anti terrorist financing. All of those things come together to govern how the global economy works, and all economies, if they're going to trade, if they're going to invest, will plug into that. And individuals or companies have to abide by the rules that are set out by these institutions. Now, it's important for special economic zones because they're not exempt from following these rules. It's particularly important for those who have to design or have to administer special economic zones, the regulators, because and policymakers in the first instance, because it limits or directs in some ways policy choices. So, for example, special economic zones in the past, and it's important to note context here, because oftentimes people will study special economic zones and say, oh, that economy did very well. They implemented special economic zone, but you have to remember, there's a time and place for everything, and certain things that were allowed in the past now are not allowed. For example, under the World Trade Organization, the countervailing duties agreement, you're not allowed to have export subsidies anymore. So zones of the past had export subsidies, meaning you not subsidize, subsidize, you incentivize people exporting. So if industries are geared solely towards exporting, you created a regime or incentive scheme so that they're geared towards it, exporting. Those were taken away. The least developed and several developing countries, including Jamaica, had a certain reprieve as at 2015 to get their house in order, to get rid of export subsidies. And we did. And we moved from our old free zone regime to our new special economic zone regime, and got rid of export subsidies. So that's one example of the limitations or direction in which global economic governance will facilitate or drive zone options. So excuse me here, it's a little hot today. Zone policymakers are limited in what they can do. Likewise, with the WTO, you can't have domestic content requirements, prohibited. Likewise, you can't just have zones that are strictly for export. You have to have two-way trade with the domestic economy and the zone. Hence, certain changes, for example, that Jamaica brought forward when it moved from its free zone to its SEZ regime. Another important area, which I'll discuss in a future episode, is Beps, which is the base erosion and profit shifting arrangement under the OECD. And this basically says that we don't want companies moving from high tax jurisdictions to low jurisdictions And you may say, but how do you stop that? And isn't that the whole point of foreign direct investment? Well, there's a little caveat or a little nuance to it, in that you have to have, which I'll discuss in another episode in more detail, substance. What they don't want is basically people setting up, a PO box. There's no substance. It's just, for show. You send your capital overseas, and in essence, you move it from being taxed at say 20 or 25% income tax to, in Jamaica, say 12.5% income tax. That's what they don't want to see happen, and erode tax bases around the world, particularly from the OECD members. So that's another thing that you have to be clear on. And for example, Jamaica's rate of 12.5% was no accident in terms of for occupants and single entity. That wasn't an accident. That was basically the lowest level that we could go without violating the agreement under Beps. So we had to. That's how the global economic governance, for example, shaped Jamaica. In one instance, and it has shaped others as well. So for example, Costa Rica has had to change their regime and create what they call under what's called the nexus approach, which I'll discuss in another episode, where you have to have a nexus between the investment and, so economic activity actually taking place in the country of investment versus just actual capital moving. So global economic governance definitely impacts the how SEZs function, how they can be set up, how the regimes can be designed. So it's very important, not just for the policymakers, but also for investors, because this is how it's going to shape how the zones can function, and then thereafter how your operations function, how you move money around. So for example, the zones are often targets for illicit trade and conversion of illicit money, dirty money, from actual cash into goods, and then movement within the global supply chains. And that has drawn the attention of many regulators around the world, particularly the Financial Action Task Force. Again, as I said before, they deal with anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing activities. So how money moves around it matters, and there are certain things that will be put in place that such as beneficial owners. We have to know who the beneficial owners are. In Jamaica, our Companies Act was changed in 2017 in order to comply with those things, so that we don't get blacklisted and create difficulties for investments to come to the country or even trade to take place. So that's in essence how the global economic governance system impacts special economic zones. So if you liked this episode, please like, share, leave a comment down in the comment box below. Please, I want to hear from you guys. Leave a comment, leave suggestions for future episodes, and I will get right back to you. Bye for now.